Recording. There we go. Mic's on. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Uh,
Morning.
Hello.
so the theme this week is rapid development, and yeah, I I don't need to say anything more. Okay. First, a couple of items of just interesting things that I noticed happening on the forum. Klepto's 2's volumetric lighting post-processing effect dropped this morning or last night. I just saw it a couple of hours ago. It looks very cool, so that's in the showcase forum. And also, SpiderPig released a exporter for Blender that will export an Ultra Collider file for physics. So that might be something that that you can use to augment your development pipeline. So definitely check both of those things out. They're in the both in the showcase forum right now at ultraengine.com/community. Okay, so let's review last week. I've been I've been promising you guys that the pace of development is going to increase, and I think this is the first week that we really saw the benefit of that. In large part, that was due to switching from Vulkan 1.3 to OpenGL 4.6, and that just freed up so much of my time so that I could focus more on writing software. So 11 bugs were resolved. One of those was done by just saying rather abruptly that okay, we're not going to support this feature anymore, but we can discuss that. The new world settings dialog was added. We now have full compatibility with AMD cards with the 0.9.5 version that's available on the beta branch right now. We have multi-sample anti-aliasing in the editor. We have I resolved some issues having to do with MSAA and post-processing effects, and I'll explain that in more detail in a few minutes. Added the specular gloss shader family in that was missing for the new rendering backend, and then finally, just yesterday, libzip integration was added, and I believe this solves all of our little small issues that we had with zip files. So, the world settings dialog, this is new. The way that we're treating directional lights in the editor is different now. It's just the editor just handles a single directional light called the sun, and instead of treating this as a normal entity in the editor that you create, it's settings that you set in these world settings in this dialog. If you don't want the sun, then you just turn the brightness or the color to 0 black, and it'll disable it. You have these settings. You have the color, and then azimuth and elevation, which are just fancy ways of saying yaw and pitch. And then you have your PBR reflection maps down here. I removed the world gravity setting because I didn't feel that it was really that useful. It can still be set. You can still add a component that changes the world gravity, but normally it's not really something I see people using. I also changed the default world gravity to -20. The reason for this is, well, on Earth, at the surface at sea level, the gravity is something like -9.8562 something meters per second squared. It's an acceleration value. But in game physics, we have a lot of damping to prevent runaway floating point imprecision from creating like runaway energy increases in the system. And so game physics if you use the actual Earth gravity acceleration value, the physics tend to look sort of like floaty because there's so much damping. So I changed the default to -20, which usually looks about right to me. We have an entire tab just for fog settings. And then we have the last tab is for post-processing effects. You guys have actually had this for like probably like 4 or 5 days now. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yes, I tried to set up the skybox, and for some reason, the terrain is getting white when I set the diffuse map. I think
Okay.
diffused reflection. Yes, the terrain get white. Then I use the diffuse.dds texture from the old which you put in the project.
Okay, I'll check that out. So I just created a new
Um,
terrain with that ground with that dirt TDS texture, and then set the diffuse reflection.
Yeah, I just created a terrain like normal, and then I tried to set up the diffuse reflection. I can show you what's happening and make a screenshot.
Yeah, could you post that in the chat, please?
Yes,
Okay.
moment.
regarding the gravity, so the map no longer overrides the world's gravity anymore. So in my game code, I could set the gravity to be whatever I want, and as long as the world doesn't delete, the gravity will stay consistent between level loads.
Do you guys think? Do you think that's? Do you want it to work that way? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, in Cyclone, I forced my gravity to because in Leadworks it was like -25, and in Cyclone it's like -18, and then every time I load a level, I had to force the gravity to be -18.
Yeah. Well, I don't even have a setting for it now in the editor because I figured.
Right, but I'm saying like
Yeah.
if the map is not loading, is not telling the world to set its
Oh,
gravity.
so it's not resetting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the code to do that was removed. I'll double check and make sure, but I
Alright.
think that's how it works. Do you guys like this?
Also-
Oh, go ahead.
And also, can you delete your skyboxes and everything, or that's still work in progress? Because there was some talk about that.
Yeah.
About
Honestly, the reason for there's no way to delete it right now is I was kind of thinking that I would use like I would like right click on this and have like a menu that a pop up menu that says delete or remove, but it's not good. It's not good to have a hidden like secret interface like that because that's not very
why don't you
obvious.
why don't you just add a delete button next to the folder icon like in Leadworks?
Because the icon
Or
is
just
ugly.
Oh well, why don't you just use a drop down menu like for the asset menu?
Because I like the folder icon.
Okay.
These are I'm telling you, this is why it is. Yeah, it's like some decision making that needs to be finalized. I agree. Yeah, it's just it bothers me. Like if you have one bad icon, then it throws off the look of the whole interface. Like just one
Well,
bad icon.
just get a better icon. Just,
I know.
like it's not that hard to make an X.
I know it's just hard. I want it to look good.
There's also something wrong with the God rays, I think. First of all, I posted a screenshot from the environment, from the reflection.
Mm-hmm.
This is the God ray. It's here in the text channel from this chat. This is the environment.
This?
This is the thing with the God rays. So if I put in God rays, this happens when I look towards to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets white, and the picture above is the reflection thingy from the environment. If I set in the diffuse reflection.
Okay. So this has to do with the the issue that you said before with the diffuse environment map.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll just try both of those things at once and see what happens, and I'll ask you if it's not immediately obvious. Okay. But do you guys like this approach?
Yeah, I think it's more an artistic focus on controlling the environment instead of a technical.
Because this
So
is just something that actually this just came up in last week's discussion. Like, okay, so that's in AMD compatibility. 0.95.5 is fully compatible with AMD. I did not actually find any driver bugs with AMD's drivers, so no complaints there. There was a couple of issues. There was a couple of issues with terrain actually. One was that I made a mistake to where like every time you sculpted the terrain, like every single change you made would result in a new texture being created and sent. So it was like creating like hundreds of textures, and so I figured that out, and I was like, once I figured that out, it would crash on AMD cards after a few minutes. Well, on the AMD card on the 6600 that I was testing with, but it didn't crash my NVIDIA 1080. So once I fixed that issue, then the problem was solved. And then there were some details with Spire V. I was actually I wasn't parsing the Spire V files correctly entirely, and so I was listing some uniform variables that aren't actually used in the shader. They're declared in the shader, but they never get used, and so they get removed from the shader is compiled. But they're still listed, and so I had to remove those. And once I did that, then everything worked great. So I've got no complaints about AMD's drivers. And in fact, the card I got for testing this is the AMD 6600. I got an Asus brand because I wanted something that would last for a long time. And it was a little bit over $200. It was like $220. And I'm pretty happy with this card. I mean, if you're looking for a reasonably priced card that can run everything high end except extreme ray tracing, like it'll do Quake 2 RTX, but it won't do Portal RTX. So everything except the extreme heavy ray tracing, the AMD 6600 is a card that I can give that a thumbs up.
well, Portal RTX doesn't work because that's proprietary NVIDIA stuff too.
But isn't Quake 2 RTX the same?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Probably it. Portal RTX doesn't even run great unless you have a 4090 anyway. Like you have to make a lot of compromises.
Okay.
So.
All right. So we now have a setting for multi-sample anti-aliasing in the editor. The default is 2x, which I find it looks really great. I think with anti-aliasing, there's definitely like you definitely get like diminishing returns. Like 2x looks way better because all the jagged edges are gone. 4x looks a little bit better. If you're at really high resolution though, you can't. It's hard to see. 8x doesn't really. It's hard to tell. 32 at 16, 32. Some of those higher numbers, you might want to use those if you're doing like a single render and you just want a really high quality render. But I find like 2x at 4K is awesome. 4x at 1080p is also awesome. So that appears in the 3D viewports and also in the 3D rendering for if you have like a model or a material open. I resolved some. I further improved how MSAA and post processing work together. So my first, pass at this, what we did is we had our G buffer, which is always rendering to a 2D MS texture, even if anti-aliasing is disabled, it's still rendering to a 1x 2D MS texture. And then the effects, it would retain those multiple samples all the way through the post-processing chain. And that was cool. And then, the very last step, when it gets copied to the back buffer, that's where it would get resolved to a single 2D image. And that's where the anti-aliasing, you would get those anti-aliased pixels. What it does now instead is it still renders to a 2D MSG buffer, and then it immediately resolves that to a 2D image and passes the next result to the first effect and the second effect and then to the back buffer. And what that does is when you do, the sooner you resolve the multiple samples, then the fewer pixel samples have to be taken further down the chain. So this saves, like, these two steps no longer have to run in multi-sampled mode. And so they're they're going to be way faster. And post-processing effects tend to be something that that do sometimes form bottlenecks. And so that's why this is pretty important. So what that means is the G buffer always uses 2D MS textures. Even if anti-aliasing is disabled, it's still using a 1x 2D MS texture. And then your previous buffer, in each post-processing shader, if you have like the previous color buffer declared, and any auxiliary buffers, extra textures that you use, are going to use regular 2D textures. So typically in a post-processing effect, you're going to have things declared like this, where you've got this 2D MS depth buffer, 2D MS normal buffer, and then sampler 2D for the previous. This is the previous render, whether it came from, wherever it came from. That's just the previous color image. And something pretty interesting came up in the screen space ambient occlusion effect. This is actually the only effect I have that actually utilizes the depth buffer. Actually, no, that's not true because DOF does too. But what I did here was first I get the number of texture samples in that depth buffer. So if it's if it's using 8x multi-sampling, then that count is going to be 8. If it's 4, it's going to be 4. Okay. And then I calculated, so this routine, it does a certain number of different samples for the SSAO effect. And by default, it's 8. But what I did here is I said, okay, I'm going to take 8 divided by the number of texture samples. And then I'm going to distribute that across the different samples in that depth buffer so that I can get different results and blend them together. And so I did 8 divided by count, and then I had to set a max because, the count, that MSAA value can go higher than 8. It might be 16, in which case this would be 0. So I want it to be at least 1. But 8 divided by count. And then I just distribute the same number of samples across several textures. And so as a result, the SSAO effect, when MSAA is enabled, the SSAO effect doesn't have any extra expense to it, but it does use those multiple samples from the different samples stored in the depth buffer. So that was a very nice resolution to that problem, because it's like we've got the anti-aliasing, but we're also not increasing the cost of our post-processing effects, especially SSAO, which tends to be a rather expensive effect. Okay, so the specular gloss shader family was missing from the initial implementation of the new rendering backend. That's just been added in. This is important because Sketchfab models use this a lot. I think whenever they have GLTF models that go through their automatic conversion process, I think they use the specular gloss effect, and so that's good to have that in place. This is one single GLTF file, and this was downloaded straight from Sketchfab, and that's what it looks like when it's first loaded up with no changes. So that worked out very nicely. And then finally, I wasn't expecting this, but Friday, I was just planning on doing resolving some bugs, and I was looking at what issues were still live. and I saw something about zip files. And I remembered we had, before we had a problem with greater than zip files that were bigger than 4 gigs. We also had problems with the zip library we were using did not support the newer zip encryption, which I think is called AES. So I searched through a few different libraries again. There's libzip, zlib, ziplib. There's some other one. What is it? Minizip and Minizip NG, which I guess is next generation. Libzip was the one that turned out to deliver what we needed. So all of these issues are resolved. The file names in zip files will be treated as case insensitive. This has nothing to do with the underlying library. This is just my implementation, and I just made the decision, okay, we're going to make it case insensitive just because I don't want people to... that's to prevent problems when you package your game up in a zip file. If it suddenly switches to a case sensitive file system, then you're kind of inviting problems into your life, and so let's just not make that an issue. So I'm actually really happy with that. And when I was starting that, I was like, great. I do not want to do this. I don't want to waste a week, redoing writing our zip routines for the third time. But I actually I got it done in probably less than 2 hours. So I was very happy with how that worked out. That was just a surprise ending. So what next is the question. And we have our friends Sanic and Tiles.
Flails. And
Knuckles. Does he have a funny name? Okay. This poor kid is going to have so many traumatic issues. They're going to have to form a whole new branch of psychology just for... Anyways. Okay, so back to a couple of weeks ago. I attributed this quote to Jackie Chan, which is not true. This is from Sun Tzu, and it's just when I was making the slideshow, I was quoting the art of war in a technology presentation. That's so cliche. Maybe I'll mix it up and say that Jackie Chan said it, and nobody called me out on it. But okay, I'll read this and just really think about it. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So what does that actually mean? Here's Sonic as a ancient Chinese warrior, courtesy Bing image generator. Okay, so this is a good lesson for me, and perhaps you guys can take something from this as well. I think what this really means in our case is know yourself means be realistic about your own limitations, and at the same time don't overlook your own advantages that you have. So when I talk about limitations for me and for you guys, it's probably time. It's probably not intelligence. It's probably not talent. It's just time is the limiting factor for everything. And so you need to be realistic about that. And so do I. And make decisions that cater to that. So, make decisions that lighten your total workload. Yeah. If there's an easy way that doesn't compromise the quality of what you're able to put out, in terms of what the user actually perceives, what they actually see, then you should make your life easier. Don't let your ego, get the better of you and think oh, well, World of Warcraft 7 has 10,000 races of orcs. I'm going to have 100,000 races of orcs because, players today expect, when you start hearing people say stuff like that, it's no, not really. I mean, the thing that I see that with the most successful indie developers is they deliver value. So like DayZ, for example, I'm taking some extreme cases, but like DayZ is a terrible game, but it delivers. Like it delivers the gameplay. Like you can walk through houses. Like I mean, you can literally. There's like no collision for the buildings. At least when I tried it, but it delivers on what it's supposed to do, and you know, I think it's just like that developer could have easily gotten hung up on technical details and things that didn't really matter to the end user, and then he just never would have released his game. Again, that's kind of might be an extreme example. I'm not saying disable collision on all your buildings, but that kind of idea. And at the same time,
Well,
what's that?
I had to make. I was just saying, I had to make a lot of like things where I was just like, I know I can't fix this, and I just got to push through it or come up with a hack or something to like fix it. Because I know like in Cyclone, the physics engine is not up to par. So there was like this bug where if you launch yourself in a wall, you would just fly through the wall. So I had to make like a fix where if the player detects you flew into a wall, you just push out of the wall. I made a lot of like those decisions. I was like, it's not perfect, but whatever.
Yeah, it's like often like perfect is the enemy of good.
Well, yeah, but if you ever like look at source code for like games, there's just comments about from like developers saying, "Hack, like this is awful, this is terrible." Like, but they ship, so
They delivered on what they were trying to do, though.
right.
DayZ is not an indie game. It's actually from a big company.
I mean the old DayZ from like when it was a mod for it was a mod for some game, right?
Yeah, from Arma, and then the
Right.
Bohemia Interactive is buying the rights of it, and also hired the mod developer, and released DayZ then.
Yeah, I haven't played it since then, since like the old days, so I don't know about the new. I mean, I'm sure they probably did improve it quite a lot. And then the flip side of that is don't overlook. You have unique advantages that you don't realize sometimes, and and so do I. And nobody's going to tell you. Nobody's going to tell you that. Like everybody's going to tell you, oh, you need to have this and this and this. Players today expect blah blah blah. Well, actually, no. Like you have so at small scale, the advantage you have is rapid response to user feedback. You're seeing that right now with what I'm doing, with you guys. You have the ability to target small but profitable niches. Like VR is one that I think is a very strong one. Like, okay, so if you can put 2 months of work into a small game for VR, and it makes $100,000, that's a pretty good result. But that's too small for nobody's ever gonna tell you that you're a business genius, or EA isn't going to say, they're all going to tell you like, oh, you need to do whatever EA is doing. Just just copy whatever they're doing. But there are niches that are too small for EA or DICE to pursue. They can't, and that's sort of your target. It can be your target market. And so, it's all about like focusing hard on what you're trying to do, on what you're trying to create, and just focusing hard on delivering that value. I'm really seeing really strongly that like it's like you have technology on one side, and then you have the user experience on the other side, and there's this bridge you have to like build between them. And it's really easy to get hung up on and distracted on the wrong thing, and just focusing on like delivering that value to the end user experience. That's what I believe that's what really makes the difference between success and failure. And that's what I've been trying to, that's what I've been trying to focus on, especially lately. I think the time for, when I started Ultra, it was like, okay, no limitations. I'm going to think as big as I can, and I'm going to pursue like every idea I have. And now I've sort of like, whittled it down to where, okay, I pretty much know what's a good idea. Some of the things that I investigated, they turned out to be a really good idea. Some of the things turned out to not work as well, or not be as useful. And so, just really try to focus. So the next steps I would like to pursue, the big things, are I'd like to get 0.9.5 moved onto the default branch as soon as possible. I'd say like maybe give it another week of testing and stuff, but it will be nice to get that onto the default branch because it's much more stable. It's we no longer have that. At that point, I can remove that disclaimer that says warning AMD cards don't work. So that'll be really, really nice. And that was also in our poll. That was like the number one. AMD compatibility was the number one issue people were concerned about. And then of course there's two big features that I want to go ahead with. One is the vegetation system, and then also this large scale geospatial rendering. That probably won't make it into the engine proper until like a 2.0 version. But it is something that I can immediately make money with on the enterprise side. The question came up, like, how does that Earth rendering stuff, how can that be, can that be repurposed for general game development? And the answer is, I can answer that a little bit more clearly now. The streaming terrain system, I think I've kind of got that worked out, how it's going to work. And it's basically like identical for, I just have like a general streaming terrain system designed that I think it's going to work really, really well. So a couple of things I want to cover in discussion today. We talked last week about creating GUI interfaces directly on a frame buffer instead of the way that it's currently done. And you've had a week to kind of digest that and think about it. Now, do you guys still think that that's a good idea? What do you think?
I actually was going to bring this up because I think to avoid any issues and future bugs, I think this is like a good way to limit it because I ran into a lot of like weird bugs when I project the UI and the canvas at 3 different worlds, and I was getting like really. So I had like I had a UI, like my console, let's say a console window, in a world, but then because of my structure, I was like, okay, I'm gonna need a world for the main menu, the loading screen, and the game world. But I'm like, okay, but I want to access the console from the main menu and the game world, but not the loading screen.
And
it's
created in a different world, right?
Yeah, and I had to be creating different worlds. But even though I was like hiding so I had to create like 2 console windows. It pulls from the same like stream, but the input was like getting confused between which one was which. So I'll be typing and nothing would show up. But if you hit enter, the log would pop up. And I think it's just better if you just...
Oh, so you had like 2 or 3 different GUIs going at the same time, basically?
Yeah. And they're polling at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they're all in a update hook, polling hook. So I think it's just better to just have like say, all right, if anything's drawn on top of the screen, on top of whatever, it's always there all the time, regardless of world. And then what you do is that you just manage what is drawing at what period. So, and the only thing you have to do is be able to change the frame buffer when the level's loading. But
Yeah,
if
that's the only.
it's solved, but if it solves resizing automatically, um, instead of the end user managing that event, I think it's a huge plus because there's less bugs you have to worry about, and the end user doesn't have to worry about, oh, what happens if the user resizes the window? It should just happen automatically, like it is on a standard GUI application, where just everything, where set layout just works.
Yeah, so in other words, like, if we take this approach, then it'll pretty much work exactly like as if you had created it on a window.
Correct.
Like the event handling is automatic and okay.
Yep. Yeah, and you just need to be able to change the frame buffer. And
Any other thoughts on that?
I
Okay.
guess not. I'm gonna kind of miss because drawing the frame buffer on a camera on a layer, like on a sprite layer, wherever, to a camera actually has its own benefits. But because in Cyclone, because in Leadworks, this sim approach was implemented. So when I draw like HUD hints and such, I actually had to draw all the HUD hints. I'd actually create like a game, like a layer or something,
Mm-hmm.
and so that like HUD hints was always like in memory. So at any time like a HUD hint was called, it would just draw. But with a camera system, you can just say, "Oh, there's a HUD hint in my scene. Draw a camera to the screen, and then this will be the HUD hint." And then you can isolate that HUD hint in its own little box. It doesn't have to be part of this massive layers upon layers upon layers thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only like downside of like doing it as a master canvas over the screen. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I don't have a timeline planned on that. I'll probably release 0.9.5 with things how they are with the GUI system how it is because I'd rather like get more testing of it before I make that default. But that sounds pretty good.
also we discussed one thing you mentioned. We discussed the selection changes.
Oh yeah,
Like
there actually is a selection override if you hold the control key. When you're in creation mode, it actually does select things. And then let's see.
what about box select?
Okay, there's a couple of things here. In like earlier versions, the mouse selected when you released the mouse. When you like if you clicked on something, nothing happened, but then you unclicked. When you let the mouse up, then that selection took place. And that was actually done because to help differentiate between creation and selection. After we separated the creation tool, then I made it so that when you click on something, it selects it as soon as you click the mouse button. So small distinction, and either way is okay. But I just want to point that out. Okay. Now, if one option would be to make it so that the selection does not switch it back to where selection does not take place until you release the mouse button rather than click on it. And if you if you click the mouse and start moving, then it starts drawing that selection box without any helper key or anything. It just starts doing that. I believe this is the way that Blender handles it. Another option is to make it so that in order to start drawing a selection box, you have to have the shift key pressed at the time that you click. And then when you start moving the mouse, then it starts creating drawing that selection box. One little detail is we also are using the selection key for duplicating objects. Like if you're in the translation, if you have the translation tool, and you click on something and you want to make a copy of it, if you have the shift key pressed, then it just instantly makes a copy of it when you start moving the mouse. That's probably not a problem, because if you're like, selection and translation are two different operations I think. Actually,
I don't like the idea that it registers when I release the mouse. But then it also conflicts with but the latter conflicts with the duplication. But it's something. This is something that you want to have, but you don't use it. But when you need it, you want it. So
I
you
agree.
need to like. So it's something that it's okay. It's not as accessible as just clicking or duplicating. But like, say, oh, I have all these barrels and I put it in the wrong spot, or they have to be moved over here. I want, like, even if you just copied and pasted what Blending does, where you select B, a little crosshair appears, and you just make a box selection over the entities, and then everything just resets. Like, even if that was just a thing, I think that would be acceptable. We would have to experiment it in use, and you know what I mean? We can have
And
all these ideas.
the control key is already used, because that's sort of the reverse selection, right?
I think
The control key is pressed, and you click on something, then it deselects it, or it selects it if it's not selected. It's the toggle.
You could create some thing like in Blender, and then you can have some toggle buttons. For example, if you want to add something, if you want to remove something with the selection you do the next, there are some selection modes. Maybe this can also help.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like. How is that controlled? Like, is there a toolbar or something for that?
Oh, wait, let me see. I start Blender first. I think it's in the scene. They got some special UI stuff there.
Wreckage. What is he laughing about?
Oh, I think there was a joke that you said.
Oh, probably about the Sonic the Hedgehog stuff.
Also, while we're waiting on that, any thoughts about FSR? I know we brought that up last week too.
This thing here.
Oh,
There's a small bar, so you can select if you decide if you want to add something, if you want to remove something with the selection.
I don't know. I like things to be as simple as possible. Let's see. Okay, so I want to select all these stairs. Let's say. I want to select them all at once. So
right. So you would shift, hold down.
I would just. Okay, so actually, okay, I was wrong. The way it works is it doesn't select until you release the button. Because watch, I'm clicking now, and now I'm gonna let go now. So okay, we already have it like that. That actually makes things a little bit easier.
Right. I think a better example is all those boxes, like in your top viewport.
Yeah. So how would I do that? Like, what feels natural here? What feels natural to me is just grab this and do it.
Yeah, but it'll also select. It will also select the two walls and the floor. How I would do it is I'll go to. Yeah, I just want the boxes, let's say. So what I would do is that I'll go to my top viewport and I would make a selection box around those boxes. It would select the floor, but I would just deselect the floor, and then now I have all my boxes.
Well, yeah, but this should, like, what feels right to me is just click here, drag,
and then
let go, and it looks like it's not actually going to interfere with the tool, because
Okay.
Okay, here's the caveat to that. If I click on this, if the thing is already selected, okay.
Uh-huh.
If this wall is already selected and I try to do that, then it's going to move the wall.
Right.
So that's the caveat that I will put on that. But if nothing is selected, and I click on here and I drag and then I let go, then it's going to do like what we want. Do you think does that make sense?
Yes.
But with the selection modes, you also could say, okay, so you don't want to move anything if a selection mode is enabled from this. I think it's 4 or 5 selection modes.
I know, but it's complicated. Like I'd have to have a selection tool here. I would have to have like a little drop down box here with a bunch of different. It's like a lot of things to add. I mean, I prefer to make things as simple as possible if it can be done.
But this stuff like this is also get used in every program. So you got this in Adobe, you got this in Corel, you got this in Blender and 3D Max. It's a really simple control for
Okay.
the group selection.
I will take a look at these because I don't actually. I'll take a look at these and see. I have Blender installed right here, so I'll try them out and see how they work. Yeah, let me just like write a note here. Try different selection modes in Blender.
And you also need the stipples shader done. So we get a nice stipple box.
Full shader. Okay, yeah, very important. Really? All right. Okay, so any other thoughts on that?
Not on the selection, no.
Yeah, I mean, we might end up doing both of those things. Like, we might just have this be the default behavior. But if I'll take a look at these selection tools, and if it turns out there's something like really useful there, then we might, yeah,
Make like a dedicated selection tool and have all the types of selections you can do.
that might be interesting. And I kind of like, I feel like just so that that guy, what's his name? A game from scratch,
Right.
Mike. If he
Yeah.
makes another video, I don't want him to not know how to select something and be like, "Oh, I created a box. I don't know how to do anything else." Like if there's an arrow up here, I mean, he's great, and he's a smart guy. But I want to make sure that things are very very clear.
Well, you could add, for example, an button to this 6 buttons on top, which is like the box button, so a selection mode button or something. You know what I mean? That you create one more button there with a drop down, and then with the icons to select these for the different modes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like have a button right here that has like an arrow, like a mouse cursor on it or something, and then if you click on it, like kind of like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
One thing I keep doing when I want to create a box, I keep pressing the arrow instead of the actual thing. Like when I go from like translation mode, and then it's like, all right, I want to make a box. I keep pressing the arrow.
We'll stop doing that.
Can't. I
Can't
still go to
stop.
the right side panel. I still go to the right side panel too. So,
What do you mean the right? Oh,
like how it was in Lightworks.
well. Do you think that's something that's? Do you think that's gonna be
No, it's just
get better with time,
no. Maybe.
practice?
Unfortunately, I don't spend much time in the editor. I'm more coding than making things in the editor. But
I figured out something. I'm currently testing a bit with this the scene stuff and the environment, and you really need to test it with the terrain. So
Okay.
even if I start the game, it doesn't look like in the editor. It looked really weird in the game itself. I'm not sure if it's a problem from my files or if it's a problem from the engine itself.
Is it, okay? So are the shaders all up to date in this project?
Yeah, I basically recompiled all the shaders.
Well, recompile. You don't need to recompile anything. You don't need to compile shaders at all. But you do need to have the shaders. So the shaders in 0.9.5 changed quite a bit from 0.9.4, of course. But then just recently, I made a change to the materials. I had to add the specular gloss information into the material structure that's stored on the GPU. And so if you don't have if your shaders aren't up to date in the you know how to do that in the
I updated the project, so
Okay.
there was my projects are pretty up to date. Yes,
Okay.
there is
Okay, cool.
the green thing behind.
All right, I'll try it out then. And if
I posted a screenshot. This is how it looks in the game itself.
okay, all right, I'll try that today. Let's see. Okay, anything else about the editor interface?
This has been a recurring request among users. When are you gonna put it back in this 3D gizmo? Because people keep demanding it.
Before the release of 1.0.
Okay.
I love this. Yeah, I can understand why. Just for a translation, right? Because we've got that, which I think is good. Yeah, we just need it for that one tool.
Right, and also to like a nice way to show like what's forward on an object and such.
That's
I think
true.
that's more important to me. I just wanted to see like what's normal straight, normal forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's like something I think we can't. I think that's something that's too integrated into people's expectations. I don't think we can really change that. I might add an option to keep this method though, because I really like it.
Right,
We'll
just have
see.
it like bool, where it's like it would just be like show 3D gizmos, and you can just uncheck it and
Yeah,
it'll go away.
something like that. Um, anything else about the editor interface? One thing I really like with
Oh,
the. Go ahead.
is there an easier way to make prefabs besides just right-clicking something, making it a prefab, and then editing? Because I feel like that there should be like a create prefab menu, and then you can like add objects into the scene and adjust sprites and such. But I don't think that's how the prefab setup is right now.
Well,
I think it's
a prefab file is a map with a different
right.
extension and a single top level entity. So you can open a prefab from here.
Okay.
And I don't have any, but you can open a prefab file in the map
Well,
editor and then
well,
just work on it.
make that box a prefab. Let's see how this is done because it's I haven't really checked this out. So
Save as
save it as
prefab.
prefab,
Okay, let's
and then
call it test.
yeah, I feel like prefabs should be in the maps file, but that's up to the end user.
Should be in the what?
Maps folder, but that should be up to the end user because since a prefab is a map
There's my
and
prefab.
you need okay. Now, all right, I want to edit it. I want to make it blue, and I want it to reflect. How would I edit the prefab? You have to open it. I thought there was like a menu or something. Okay. So it's like LEDWorks pretty much.
Right.
Also, you not having a scene makes more sense here. The scene tab, like a scene like option. Because that was kind of like annoying with LEDWorks.
What do you mean?
Like the scene root node where you change like its environment and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you open a lot of the prefabs in Cyclone, there's actually like a skybox. Like when you, so this is great.
There's nothing in here that prevents you from doing that,
Right.
but it gets ignored when it's loaded.
Awesome.
I actually figured out that the terrain materials are not assigned anymore, so it's basically missing the textures. I have a message into the editor. It says texture 1 in terrain layer 0 has
Oh,
a size
I
of
know what's I know what's going
2084.
on.
That the textures are too big. It seems like.
Okay, we can accommodate that. The first question is all your terrain textures the same size though?
Until now, they have different sizes. I think. I mean, it would be not a problem to scale them down to 1024.
Okay. So let me explain what is going on here. In order to get around some limitations of basically to fix the invocation groups problem that we saw like a few weeks ago, I moved both shadow maps and terrain textures they're all packed into a single array texture. This is like a 3D texture, sort of. And that will prevent it. So that will allow you to switch textures within the same invocation group because it's still all the same texture. It's all treated as one texture. One detail of that though is all of the textures that you use in your terrain have to be the same size. In the create terrain command has a new parameter that you input that you can adjust for the texture size for that terrain, and the default is 1024. In the editor, what I need to do is in the create dialog for the editor, I need to add an option, like a little drop down box that lets you select what you want the texture resolution for that terrain to be. And then you'll be able to set it to whatever you want.
This option is not in right now, right? So
no. And what we can probably do is we can probably just modify the JSON data in your existing maps and insert that value if we need to change it, so you don't have to recreate the whole thing.
Yeah, I also could resize them. This wouldn't be a problem. But I see something. So maybe we have the image editor, right, or the texture editor, and maybe some function to resize it would be cool.
Resizing that, and that would be pretty easy to do. Actually, let me make a note of that. Actually. That would certainly be convenient.
So yeah, my textures are to 2048. I resize them. I think this should solve the problem pretty easy.
Well, if you want all 2048, then we can also we can probably change the terrain to accept that. But yeah, if you're okay with 1024, then that's also fine.
And if you're gonna add a text resize option, maybe you can also integrate AI upscaling too.
What do you know? Like what API or service do you know of that does that?
Well, you could probably probably be part of the OpenAI extension, but but there has to be something that just scales the image up.
OpenAI doesn't have upscaling.
I know Wahoo 2X does, but that's like a website.
Do they have a web API?
I don't know.
I think there are some out there probably that do have like a web API, but OpenAI
does
not.
Yeah, because that'd be cool. Because a lot of let's say like you have a lot of like textures from the source engine, they're half the size of what they should be in Ultra Engine, and if you could just AI upscale them, by 2 times, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be a cool
I-
feature. Let me know
Yeah.
if you find an appropriate like back end to make for that.
All right.
I
Yeah.
did actually
I'll look.
try. I did try upsampling with Dolly, and what I did is
Uh-huh.
I discarded
Mhm.
like 3 out of 4 pixels, basically. So every fourth pixel was still there, and I did in painting, and it just created like a completely new image. It didn't
Well,
sample it.
I have easy diffusion on my end, and I can upscale images pretty easily. I just select it and just set upscale, and it upscales it to 4K. But that's like a whole AI subsystem that takes gigs of hard
Yeah,
drive space.
I was gonna say like how many things do you have to install
Yeah.
to make that work?
Well, it's a one-click install, but it takes a lot of hard drive space because it's more than just an upscaler.
Is there a
So,
command line tool that goes with that?
well, it creates like a server on your computer, so you can technically access it remotely in your network. Um, but it's like a web API. It's kind of like going to a website and just screwing around. But I want to look into that for other things. But yeah, there has to be just something that a program or just something that even if it was just like an executable where we just say, hey, this is the image, upscale it, use CUDA cores, and it just outputs a result.
You could
So
probably use that, do that just using Lua and running curl in that case, because
right,
that'll allow you to communicate with anything just using the exe, which is now standard on Windows 10 plus.
right,
Yeah, that could probably be done as an extension.
yeah. Right. I'll look out. If you, I guess we'll look around. I guess.
Okay. Another thing I want to discuss is Quake models. Now, I thought this was just something that just kind of like sits there, and I didn't have to do any more work on it. And then I got a report like I think it was yesterday from Drake Black, something about sprite images not loading, and I I think they are supported, but like Quake does some really weird things. This was done as a kind of a test of the plugin system, and I like okay, so like whenever Drake Black whenever he posts a bug report, I usually it usually gets solved really fast because he's like a superstar bug reporter, bug hunter. He writes very good descriptions of the problem, and if there is a code example that if it is a coding problem, he usually provides a sample that I can run really quickly. And so his problems get solved really fast, and he's found a lot of issues, especially with the GUI. So I'm very happy to have him around, and I like his his Quake game that he's working on. But I like all day, all week, I was like getting things done, getting things done, getting things done. Got to go fast. And then he tells me there's an issue with the Quake plugin, and I'm like, oh. And it's like, do I want to? I'm trying to get through all of this stuff so I can get on to the vegetation system and the geospatial map and stuff and get 1.0 finished. And I'm like, dang, do I want to spend the rest of the day working on Quake files more? It's like, not really. Am I going to feel any differently in 3 days? No. And so that's why I was just like, okay, I have to make a decision. Okay, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, we need to. Um, I I'm not gonna like leave him hanging. Like, but that's why my answer was like, I think we need to just like remove this Quake loader thing plugin because like first of all, it's not useful to it. Like one person is using it, and then second of all, like okay, when we started this, like I was kind of treating the extension system and the plugin system as the same thing, and I've learned a couple of things. One is that like when people ask about plugins, what they mean is infinity feature requests. When they say does it support plugins, what they mean is, oh, so I can have a plugin that adds ray tracing, can have a plugin that adds you know an inventory system, and it's like, no, like to me a plugin means file input and output for the most part. And so like I think people are kind of disappointed when that's my response. And then the other thing is what we've seen is like there's not a lot of file formats out there that are terribly valuable. Like GLTF is the only one I know of that has a PBR material system. FBX does not. I don't actually know a single other file format that does. Maybe there is one. Maybe USDC or USDZ, which is Pixar's file format. It sometimes gets used in like CG, but there's not a lot of interesting, innovative texture file formats out there. I mean, FreeImage covers all of the image formats, like all the like 2D image formats, and then there are things like Basis and Crunch and KTX. Basis is kind of interesting. It might be useful in the future. KTX is just Basis and DDS glued together. It doesn't really have any reason for existing, in my opinion. Crunch is just really super compressed things. It's similar to Basis. Actually, Basis has a mode that does basically the same thing as Crunch. None of these file formats are super useful to us. I mean, it's not like it's 2003 when we had like 3DS and ASE. We don't have a bunch of different file formats that we want to use. Like GLTF pretty much does everything. OBJ handles quads, which is the one thing that GLTF doesn't do. And also, like we've had a lot of interest in the extension system. We've had a lot of interesting things have already come out of that, even though it's not very well documented. And I can see that continuing to be very useful. The plugin system, on the other hand, until this week, exactly 0 people expressed any interest to me in writing a plugin for a new file format. So I'm not real enthusiastic about the plugin system, and I'm not real enthusiastic about putting more effort into that. But at the same time, I'm not gonna, I don't know. This is a discussion. Unfortunately, like the person this mainly concerns is not here because his time zone is not conducive to our timing here. But yeah, I'm not super enthusiastic about like Quake models in the plugin system in general. Any thoughts on this?
The only thing about like the plugin system I like is the ability to use VPKs to store the package game data, since it supports splitting at certain sizes, where currently the current solution to do that with zips is to manually create and sort your zips.
I think libzip actually does. I think it might support split archives.
And all right, and then we can then there's like a main root file that we can just call say, hey, just load this file, and it will just grab all the pieces and just merge everything together.
I'm pretty sure. I don't think you even have to do that. I think it just handles that automatically. I'm pretty sure zip files can be split across multiple archives. It's not something that gets used very often, but
Well, for games and distribution, it's kind of critical because that's what the VPK system does, and that minimizes uploads and downloads when you update your game.
Also, you have the problem if you, for example, buy a model on TurboSquid or something else, and you deliver the model itself, you can get in trouble because you are not allowed to ship the models itself.
oh,
Well,
well,
that's well, there's
the zip archive system, it does support passwords or encryption. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. But
yeah.
regarding the
So
plugin system, it's kind of this like gray area where it exists, although it's not really getting used, and the documentation is not very good. I kind of wonder if maybe we'd be better off if like free image okay, what are the plugins that we do use is free image. That's an important one. And then that Intel ISPC compressor. That's actually, you guys might not realize it, but that's actually really important because that's why BC7 compression is so fast. If you convert an image file in Visual Studio, if you open a PNG file up and convert it to BC7 format, if it's like a 1024 by 1024 image, it'll take like 5 minutes. I'm not exaggerating. Our BC7 compressor is fast because it uses that very special Intel compiler. So those are the two plugins that really matter, and those could both be put into the engine proper.
right. Yeah. Besides like weird case scenarios, I think what the end user might do is just put that integration into their code directly.
Yeah, and like, is Spider Pig still here?
Yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
is.
he'll
Yeah,
probably have a lot to say
yeah,
about this. But
yeah.
and the one, so he's the one person who is interested in that and started asking about this, and well, using making it for a custom file format, I think that may be complicated. I'm gonna take a break here for a minute, and then we'll come back in like 3 minutes and continue discussion. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Can someone tell me why my material now is black? My terrain default material. So I added a new terrain. I deleted the old, and now I got a black material. Kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't really look at the terrain that much because I'm more worried about rooms. But your shaders are up to date, right?
Yes. Kinda weird.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I haven't been playing with the editor this week. Been busy with other stuff.
The
And
material looks good, but when you create the terrain, try to create a new map.
it looks like something's stuck in memory.
If I create the terrain now, it's only white. So I have a blank terrain and a blank scene. It's only white. And if I set up the world settings with specular and DDS, yeah, this is because specular and DDS. If I turn down this is something really weird.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but regarding just to wrap up on the plugin system, like I don't have a use for it, and I think besides weird scenarios, I think it's best just to get rid of it. And plus, it's causing some um, language conflicts because when we say a plugin, most of the time people want an editor plugin, which is technically called an extension. So it kind of adds confusion on what someone's talking about.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear what Spider Pig thinks about this.
Yeah, with everything you said, I actually agree with you. It makes a lot of sense from your point of view. From my point of view, really, I just wanted to load a custom model format so I can just make my workflow that much more efficient. I mean, I can do it without the plugin system. I mean, right now I've just made my own model loader function, really, and I can do it all like that. So it's really no drama for me now if you wanted to get rid of it. But yeah, not many people are probably going to use it.
The only side effect is that you can't load your model format in the editor.
Sorry, what was that?
You can't load your special model format in the editor. Like, let's say you have a tree model, and then in your format, you cannot place that in the editor because the editor will not know how to parse that data.
Right.
Yeah, well, for me personally, that doesn't actually matter because I do a lot of procedural generation, and I've only ever used the editor to manipulate assets like materials and colliders and stuff. But with my Blender plugin for my format, I can go straight from Blender straight to my game folder, and I don't even need to touch it. It works just with one export click. Colliders, LODs, materials, all DDS textures and everything. So for me, for my purposes and procedural generation, it works really well, and I probably won't need to touch the editor for that. So yeah, like if things don't work, if plugins won't work with the editor, then there isn't really much point in keeping the plugin SDK. I can see that now.
Well, I guess the only band-aid is what Josh can do is have it encode. Have some way where if you wanted or you needed to make your own file format for a model or a texture, there's some way you could in code side have your assets load with the same API calls.
There actually is already.
Well, yeah, that would be
good. It's a secret feature.
Well, make it not a secret. Document it.
It's
not.
I'll
post the code in the chat.
I'm sorry?
I'll just post my code I'm using at the moment in the chat.
Yeah. But yeah, if you just document, have the cool stuff of the engines, just not documented so no one knows it exists.
Well, it's in a different namespace. So if it's in like core, the core namespace, then that's stuff that's not meant to be touched or used. The reason for that is because, well, I'm not 100% sure on how it should work and things like that. Yeah, I don't know if we need to it's just like.
Can you create a terrain in this project fast? I got the problem if I create a new terrain in a new scene, it's getting just white. Oh yeah, you have the same problem.
Loading texture. Well, that's certainly not right.
Why are the quads all messed up? Look at the.
Oh, it's the LOD. It's okay. So like LOD for terrain is based on camera distance, which doesn't really make sense because if in an orthographic view. So what I need to do is I need to change that so that it calculates it based on the scaling value of the camera, the zoom. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely not correct. So I will probably get this sorted out this afternoon.
I just want to see if it's a problem only on my computer, or if you get the same thing.
No,
That the
I got the
terrain is
same
just
thing.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for alerting me to that. Yeah, and I'm kind of I'm thinking like I'm mostly thinking about like when 1.0 hits. Like save as when 1.0 hits, do we want the plugin system to be part of the feature set that that I'm telling people that you know hey, we've got all these features for you, and then okay, well, the plugin system is this going to cause more disappointment or like confusion? Then I'm not sure.
I
I
think
think
the plugin system could be really useful if you want to, for example, create something like an spawner. I'm not sure if you remind when I created my first project in Networks, I just created some tree spawner. So if you are far away from the trees, they despawn, and if you are close enough, they just spawn. And for something like this, then it would be perfect. So you could create a sphere or something in the editor, and then make your own stuff like
Well,
I think that's an editor
that's talking
plugin.
about we're talking about that. That's talking about like Lua extensions for the editor. What when I say plugin, what I mean is the DLL plugins that you load for file I/O.
Would it be possible to repurpose the plugin system so you can write extensions in C++ and not be exclusive to Lua?
That would be tough because if it would have to stay perfectly in sync with the headers for the build, like the headers for the editor and the plugin would have to be perfectly in sync. You can do that with, in fact, that's pretty much what we do with how the engine library is distributed, but it's kind of ugly. Like it would just like lead to a huge amount of problems. The extension system is great for
Yeah, it's just not documented.
if we talk about Lua, you or you guys was planning to implement C Sharp, right? So maybe creating some plugins in C Sharp would be better than Lua.
it's
I'm not sure if it's
possible. I don't know enough about C sharp yet to tell like to say like the details of that, but it's possible. Somebody's got a rooster. I just heard.
I do. I live on a farm. Don't worry about it.
You have chickens inside your house?
Yep, chickens, goats, beef cattle.
Wow.
inside your
Yeah.
house.
You have
No,
cows in your house, dude?
no, not at my house. They're in the backyard. So, I'm sorry.
He just got a he just got a headshot. That's why he's growing. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have to like destroy it even, but in the plugins, the file IO stuff, that might be something that's best to just defer that until like we get to a point where if somebody comes along and says, "Well, I want to write a CAD file loader and I want this integrated in the editor." Okay, cool. I've got all the plugin code here. Okay, we can work this out, but like it's like, okay, do I want to put time into documenting the plugin system further, or would I rather save that time and spend it all on documenting the extensions system?
I think you should create one page with an example code and write to it that it's not meant to be used by beginners or something, because you also know that many people come to Discord and think they can make games without writing any code or stuff. So just maybe post a basic example, and the people which want to create some plugins or extensions, I think they know how to read this code, and yeah.
Well, we do have that. Like on our GitHub, we have a bunch of plugins implemented. Yeah, I also need to talk to Drake Black and see like if there's a way that we can solve his issues without like messing up his game, because I like what he's doing and I want him to be able to continue that. It might be easier for him to just load those Quake files up and convert them to standard like DDS, GLTF, etc.
Yeah. I think you should just make the plugins that are needed or most useful part of the main engine, and then just leave the plugin system in place, but until it becomes a problem, and then when people start coming in and saying we need a plugin system,
Right.
then you just blow off the dust and fix it and say, oh, now you can do this.
Basically.
So. Yeah, I think you should put more time in documenting the extension system for the editor, because people want to be able to create 100 items at once with a single click, and they want to make spline wires and all this. That's what people want. They don't really care about making an image format.
Okay.
And
Spider Pig. I'm a little bit concerned about like. I mean, it's up to you what to do, but like when you put your files into like a binary blob, that's a one-way trip, usually. So if there's a way that we can keep you in GLTF, I would like to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So by like one-way trip, you mean like you can't get it back into an editor, or like you lost that data forever?
Well, that, and it's also become somewhat opaque, especially if you get into animation is complicated.
Yeah, I was thinking about animation is going to be complicated, but I was kind of thinking more of keeping it for static objects like foliage, because I'll have at least 100 different foliage items, each with 3 or 4 levels of detail, and at least for now, the GLTF process is very mundane in managing all those files.
I've got one.
So at the very least, yeah.
Okay, I've got one idea. Okay, so one idea I had was if you have something with multiple levels of detail, we could turn this blacklist. We could turn this into a regex thing. So we could type something like. And then it would eliminate, you could use this to hide all the LOD files from the asset browser view.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be helpful?
That would be helpful. I mean, the main problem I'm having with GLTF, I saw it's next on your list to discuss, pipeline there. The main problem is just managing all those materials through the asset editor. Like if I want to adjust something, I'll have to go through. I've got 48 different models for pine trees at the moment. That's including all the levels of detail. At the moment, there's 48 unique materials being loaded into the editor, and if you load the model up in the asset editor, you've got 48 materials to assign and adjust. Even if you're assigning them from a file, you've got to find the file, browse to it, apply it, save the model, go to the next one. You've got to do that 48 times, even if you just wanted to make the bark a little bit brighter or a bit darker. It's a long process to go through just to do that. I also don't like how GLTF doesn't have support for LODs, how they've got to be separate files. I did think about modifying the Blender exporter so I could do what mine does, where I can just select the high resolution model and it will automatically export the other levels of detail if they have the right graphics to it. But that's something that I can do as well if I do decide to continue with GLTF. But yeah, at the moment, like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm amazed that you're able to write like your own Blender exporter. I don't know how to do that. That's really cool.
Python.
I didn't know 4 days ago. It was all new to me. I figured it out. It was hard. Yeah, like I just finished literally in the last half an hour. I just finished the plugin and it works. And what I can do is I load all my pine tree models and levels of detail into one Blender file. I set up the materials with alpha blending, so the materials will export with alpha mask set to true if they need it. All I have to do is select the high resolution model, export as my format, and it will compile all the levels of detail into
So
one file.
So you have the
And it will
problem.
also, sorry, what?
You have the problem that you have multiple levels of details for trees, and you want to have only one, or maybe what's the thing you want to achieve?
The goal there is to achieve, I don't want to manage 4 different files. I just want one file, because at the end of the day, all the logs do, they get appended to the model when you load them in game anyway. So the log
I know.
file itself is only ever assigned to one model.
So you want to basically every level of detail in own file.
Pretty much. I mean, really, the levels of detail are only for that exact model. So really, they're kind of one file as well. It's data for one model. I like the idea of having one model, one file, all my logs, all in one file, and all I have to do is manipulate a single material, which is applied to all the logs except the billboard, the last one. It works really well at the moment. I can just select the high resolution model, export it. It automatically compiles all the logs. It automatically looks for a model ending with _PHY. It'll convert it to a collider, export the collider to the same folder. Right now, the process is export one model and instantly it works in game. There's nothing further I have to do to it. And if I want to change something in the material, I just change one single material in Blender, click export again, and away we go.
Oh, and the problem in Ultra is that you are not able to import the LODs.
well, is it
Yeah,
primarily about like keeping clutter, keeping a lot, not having a lot of files to view in this view, or is it primarily about having a shared materials?
it's everything for me. It's
Okay.
clutter. It's the fact that when you save a GLTF, you get PNG images, which just adds to the clutter. It's the fact that they don't use a shared material. It's all three of those things. Those are the main issues, and the fact that you've got extra files for LODs, which I don't really want to manipulate individual files for LODs. I just want them to just work with the one model.
Yeah, I understand where Spy Pick comes from, because in Source, all the lights and everything was just in the model format. And all you just do is just place the model on the scene, and then based on what was compiled in the model, it would change based on the view distance based on what was in the model format. So, and being on the model, being able to share multiple models, be able to share the same material is actually important, because it's because you're drawing a unique material for each model, and that's kind of dumb.
I think I had the same problem in this shooter game I started. There was the problem. I created an empty in Blender, and for attaching the weapon, and he's attached to a bone, and he's also not showing up in the editor, the empty. So maybe it would be possible to just import all meshes or something, or all LOD as a mesh, and then you can just create a component and implement something that's
Well, in Unreal,
which is hiding or showing the LOD based on your based on the camera distance.
Well, in Unreal, or the Fortnite engine, as I like to call it, you have to like name your LODs or your colliders a certain like name, and then when that gets exported, the converter looks for those names or those uh, suffixes or whatever, prefixes, and then and then it knows what's lot 0 or lot 1, or what's the collider, or what's that based on the name of the object in the model editor.
I think this is a really common way to create colliders and stuff. I think letters was also something that you can create colliders, and when you name it like with a prefix.
Yeah. Well, you had to. What I did is that I made it was called a shape back then. I would I would make a model, the shape model, express a normal model, and then use I would just use a collision, make it the shape of collision mesh, and then I would just delete the model and then and then take the physics file and then rename it to what model I wanted it to be used on. I wrote a blog post about it.
This with making a prefix for an LOD mesh would be maybe a really good option, to be honest.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
Isn't that what we do right now? We have a suffix. Like if it's called like underscore LOD1, then that. Oh, you're saying within the same file. Within
within
a single file. Okay, so are you guys seeing this? There is a LOD extension for GLTF that allows you to pack multiple levels of detail in a single file. I think that all of these extensions are supported by the Blender extension. I mean, by the Blender exporter, I think.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to look into that.
Known implementation, GLTF toolkit, Babylon. I'm not sure if it does support it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
Would it be difficult to just create a suffix and let it import as LOD? Because I was reading documentation a few weeks ago, and there was LOD support, so you basically able to create an LOD from a mesh.
It's right now it's done as multiple files. Like you just name the file. It's done by file name, which I thought was the easiest. To keep things sane. SpiderPig actually has a good. If I can find his example, he's uploaded this same pine tree. Like this same pine tree has been used in like 10 different bug reports.
Yeah, it's done a lot, that pine tree.
I have to sign in.
Are you creating this trees with Treat?
No, I got these assets ages ago. I can't remember from where.
Okay.
Years ago.
Yeah, maybe it would be an option to create an LOD suffix, and then the engine is imported as LOD 1, LOD 2, LOD 3 or something.
Let's see. So that's what there's his let's see.
That looks like a lot.
View.
That's just one pine tree.
I know, that's just one file.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's
one.
not
that bad.
It even got like 48 different things in one file.
So how many files is that?
Oh, I haven't actually got them all in one
48?
file. It's a lot.
Like 500?
What's that?
Something like that.
500 something.
Okay.
Yeah, and this tree only has a diffuse and a normal. What happens if it's a model that has also a roughness metallic matte?
Well, then you have then you have 700 files. Yeah, I see your point.
Hard to manage.
This is Yeah, it sounds like it might like I don't know. It sounds like like a totally compiled custom model format might be advantageous, which I don't want to say that because it's contrary to my goals here, but I see your point.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not saying get rid of GLTF, but because
No,
it does have the benefit of um, being re-input into Blender, but for actual production uses, it has for games, it actually has a lot of limitations and
yeah, I
side
agree.
effects.
Let's okay. One thing about like okay, if you need to apply a material to a lot of files at once, that's actually something the extension system is actually really great for.
Yeah.
And I have an example of this. Let's see. If you open up this extension, it will. What it does is it treats the GLTF as just a JSON file, and then let's see where your materials are in here. So I mean, it would not be that hard to write an extension that was like apply this material to all of the models found in this folder, and okay, the material has a name. It's called leaves. So if you select a material, a file like an external file, and then you say, okay, now apply it to all of the material, all the models in this folder, and then it just opens up this JSON data, and it looks for a material called the same name, leaves, and then it modifies whatever values it needs to, and then resaves that GLTF file as just normal JSON, just using a Lua table. Just using load table and save table. That would be a way to apply to do that in just 1 second. And those kind of special cases are what the extension system is good for.
But
Yeah.
I think what we want the model to point to a separate material file.
An external,
Yeah,
right?
that-
An external. Okay, another
Yeah,
option.
that was my next.
Another option would be to, when the GLTF is loaded, if a material has a name, if it encounters this, then it could look for a leaves.material file in the same directory and load that instead of the what's embedded in the file.
Yeah,
Or
I
you
like
could
that. I think that. Like, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, because I usually name my material what the file is actually going to be called.
That's one possibility.
I think I mentioned, I think it was a week or two ago as well, about adding in the extras. We talked about adding a path in there. Now, if we use the asset editor to browse to a material, it applies it to the GLTF like normal, but it also stores a material path variable in the extras structure, and that when you load the model in game or with the asset editor, it will look for that first. It'll go, oh yeah, there's a material path. I'll use that instead of loading the material from the GLTF file.
I know, but it gets complicated when you start doing stuff like that because
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
if I open up a model and then I drag a material onto it, which I don't think this is even supported yet, but if I drag a material onto it and apply it, and then I save the model, well, am I saving an embedded material or am I saving a reference to an external file?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, this stuff is pretty difficult to get right. So when we do things that increase the complexity of that, it does make things kind of tricky.
Yeah. I understand. That's kind of where making your own custom format comes in handy for those people who want to do it.
Mm.
If
I'm
we
not-
really want to make something different, we can just do that.
I'm not that known with C++, but is it possible that you kind of can serialize an class, so you can save it as JSON? And for example, in C#, it's possible that you just can save a class with the JSON library, and you can load this exact class again. So yeah, would be maybe an option to import the GLTF as model and save this model within serializer. So if you make changes to the imported model, you make only changes to the serialized file.
Well, C++ doesn't have reflection.
Okay, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are some. Maybe someday. Okay, let me ask you guys. Let's just say if you had. I'll tell you one problem I have with GLTF on my end is I haven't been able to implement saving of animation yet. And I know the animation like slicing features in LEDWorks are something that are super useful. And even though animation is theoretically supported in Blender, it seems that nobody can actually use it.
Well, Marcel wrote 2 great blog posts about how you can set one up too. I didn't try it. I asked him to do it because he was doing this.
Oh,
I'm like,
okay.
how are you doing this? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so he gives you like screenshots to try to like set it up.
Yeah, that guy's talented.
Yeah.
I think the best way would be an own file format.
Yeah, I kind of miss the .mdl file format. You're making me miss that.
Yeah, I'm sort of seeing your guys' point. So I'm not agreeing to do anything yet, but let me just ask you if there was like a custom model format for this engine, you would want it to have external material files?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, that makes the most sense. I mean, it's cool that a model can that the model can have its own embedded material, but there are times in cases where you kind of just want the material to be separate, so you can have multiple things point to it, and you can limit draw calls or whatever, you know.
Okay, so texture should be external as files as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd have like a lot of duplicate textures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you would have LODs all packed into a single file.
Yeah, I would.
And you can set in the model file you set the distances between each swap, and you can preview that in the asset browser.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be good.
Yeah.
I link you something in the chat. You could have a look about this. It's pretty new. He explains something about the asset system he is working and how it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll take a look after the chat.
Also, if the model could have something called like this could be done in the prefab system, but if a model can have points of interest without having a skeleton, like a socket or something, or a pivot in the model format, that'll be useful.
Well, you can already do that. Okay, so it's funny how like a lot of stuff with LEDWorks, I got it right the first time. Honestly, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why we used it.
I did look at. Sorry, go.
No, I was just saying, but it's good that you explore this avenue because GLTF makes it so you can go on Sketchfab and just plop in any model you find without converting it first. I think support for GLTF is important, but for production, for game development, where you have your sources and you have everything you need, it's just kind of the benefits are get in the way, like are not really worth the sacrifices, as to put it.
Okay, so you're looking at GLTF as an interchange format, basically.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Okay.
but I want to optimize my model for the engine and then be like, oh, well, um, if this hypothetical new model format also supports physics data like you were trying to implement in the beta long ago, that would also be beneficial because you can set the mass of the model, and every time that model is loaded like a bottle model, right? That you know that will have a consistent mass no matter how many times it's placed, and you don't have to manually enter it or create a prefab. So there's a lot of benefits of having a proprietary model format. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll think about it.
yeah. Well, if SpiderPig can write an extension, a Blender extension that can export everything we want it to have, the animation might be a little rough,
I
but
think it'll break down when he hits animation, honestly. But I don't know. I might be
Yeah.
wrong, but
I can tell you it's hard. The animation things because you
Yeah.
need to extract every keyframe and yeah. I think maybe the if you really want to do something, maybe Josh could do an external program or just an embedded program into the editor, which is just a converter. So you put, for example, you can use asmp, load the file, and yeah, create your own format then as a wrapper or something.
yeah, well, that's what Loic did. It had FBX to MDL, and unfortunately, he said last week he doesn't have the source code for that. So
I can keep paying the guy to keep updating it, but it's a vulnerability.
right,
But what's the point against asmp?
Does ASIMP does it support the specular gloss shader family?
I
Does it
think you
even
can do
support peak?
basically everything with asmp. You can load every file with asmp, I think.
Yeah, but I don't doubt that it loads a lot of files. I doubt that it loads GLTF. I doubt that it loads GLTF with as much detail as what we do currently. Just
I
because
can
it's
ask one of the devs. I'm in a discussion forum
yeah. Ask
with
him if it. Please ask him if it supports PBR materials, and also ask him if it supports the specular gloss shader family. The specular gloss extension. I mean.
okay. PBR. I know that is supporting also is supporting PBR, and the thing you need to write me maybe in message or something so I can ask him.
I'll look for it here. GLTF specular gloss extension.
I'm not sure, but you can have a look into this. Maybe it's helped you already. Wait. Yeah. There is something with specular gloss.
GLTF PBR. Okay. Yeah, that's probably.
I mean, these are some definitions, but I think it's supporting all the stuff you need.
Maybe. We can. Yeah, we can consider this. Let's see. I'll have to take a look and see what other extensions I support in GLTF. I think there's a few others, but that's the really important one because Sketchfab uses that everywhere. Yeah, I do feel like sometimes, on one hand, like it would be nice to, it might be possible to do everything that you guys are saying you want within GLTF within the existing confines of it. But at the same time, I also do feel like I jumped through quite a lot of hoops to make this work.
no,
Yeah.
it's great that it's supported. It's just if we can have something more tailored for the engine and you have more control over it instead of relying on someone else's standard, I think that'll also be beneficial.
Yeah, I also think the
Yeah.
big thing you have with SM, for example, you don't need to care about any models or anything else. So you have basically an SM model in the end. So yeah, you don't need to care about extensions or something else.
Okay. I need to write. I'll write up like a summary of everything you guys are saying, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a very interesting thing. You know, every week, like a lot of times, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about until like the day before, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog.
And then we spend 2 hours talking about like model formats and
It's all good fun.
and plugins.
Yeah, but I guess like yeah, anything I can do that that accelerates development is a very good thing because I realize I'm not a big company. I don't have, I actually came across an interesting concept. Maybe I'll talk about it next week. Of like, tech companies are actually employing people that they don't need just because they have all this investment money and they can't show they don't have their revenue sucks, so they can't show that as like an indication of growth. So they just hire people that they don't need in order to demonstrate. That's their way of demonstrating growth. That's why they're able to lay off like 70% of their workforce without anything changing. I don't know. It's an interesting concept, and it actually like kind of makes sense. I saw somebody was talking about it, but anyways, like I'm a small, this is a small company. I need to like, treat it as such. And like Jackie Chan and Sonic told us, you know, know yourself, which means, you know, time is, recognize, be realistic about your own limitations, primarily time, and don't let your ego let you. I have overextended myself in some ways, and I'm trying to roll that back and do exactly this, make decisions where I can be more nimble in responding to your needs so that we can get on with this kind of stuff, which is what I want to be doing. And
Right.
this kind of stuff is what, I didn't do this is Klepto's work, but I'm very happy to see
That
it
needs to
happening.
be released or be default in the engine because a lot of people are gonna want that. Telling you
Well,
straight up.
I don't think it's a coincidence that this happened to get finally released like, a week after the renderer was moved to OpenGL. Because I do know that it, from what he's saying, like, he says that it simplified his workflow was simplified quite a lot. You can read what he said himself, but it was something to that effect. But this is the kind of stuff I want us to be focusing on, not,
Right.
down in the weeds of stuff. I want to get to those higher levels of functionality. I really want to. I really want to get back to that, and fucking around with weird standards and other things that might not be adding a lot of benefit to the engine. I think it's important to be able to say no to the things that aren't as important.
Right.
Yeah.
My concern is that I just don't want I don't want to feel the rug has been pulled away from me when you like if you change an API to do something or you change the model format or I kind of want all those changes to happen before 1.0. So I don't make a solution one way of doing it and then you just pull the string and then I have to refactor my code to do it the new way. That's my
Yeah.
concern.
I agree.
I think you're on a good way with the engine, and yeah, it's not your fault if something like Vulkan is designed to have a whole team make a render API that you can render properly all the things.
Well, any other thoughts?
No, I guess just make the most stable thing possible, I guess, and just listen to your users and what you've been doing.
You do the same.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. That was, as always, it was a super interesting session. Very groundbreaking ideas, and I think the people who listen to this on YouTube probably get a lot of enjoyment out of it, because the stuff that we discuss here is pretty mind blowing a lot of times. So
Yeah. Also, I gave you DeepAI has a API you can look into. You can access through curl with the upscaling we talked
oh,
about.
okay.
I just want-
Is
I
it
just wanted
local
to
or
point
is
that
it
out.
on a server somewhere?
I think it's on a server somewhere. You can look into it. It's in the chat, the voice chat. If you scroll up,
Oh, okay.
scroll up. Yep, 2-second Google search. I just pulled it up real quick.
Super resolution. Okay, cool.
Maybe
All right.
a cool thing would be if you, I'm not sure, but you could try to upscale it with SSR, for example. I'm not sure if it's working, but it would maybe a good point into the FSR development and support, so you know how it's working.
Yeah, I actually talked to the guy who wrote the OpenGL implementation of that. I just randomly talked to him on Reddit or something. Yeah, I use Reddit every once in a while, only for technical stuff. I'm not a Redditor. I'm a lead worker. I'm an ultra. What is our? We need a name for ultra people.
Ultra developers.
Ultra dev.
Ultra dev.
All right. All right. You guys have a good weekend.
Yep.
You too.
You too. Thank you.